Everyone, I wanted to welcome everyone to this month's Voyage Fromage, which is all about New England, which is very exciting for me. One of my favorite things to talk about, in fact. So just to introduce myself, I am sure I'm a new face for most of you. My name is Jeremy Blaustein. I'm the general manager and the cheese buyer at our Kendall Square location, which is still the newest and smallest of our 3 shops in the Boston area. I've been there since we opened for 7 years, but going on, 11 and a half years with the company, starting off at the Huron Ave store and then working at the Kendall Square location for the last 7+. If you've done these before, I'm sure you've heard a lot about how our company prides itself on importing some of the very best cheese in Europe. And on relationships we have with those producers. And that is a really important and really exciting part of what we do. And it's not what we're going to talk about tonight, because we are here in New England, right in our own backyard. As a lifelong New Englander, it makes me extremely proud and excited to talk about the artisanal producers we have here. And also think about how they're kind of hopefully paving the way for future generations, as people have been doing in Europe for quite a long time. There's some really, really interesting differences in the approach to cheese making here. Definitely their own set of hurdles and challenges doing similar operations here, but they're still doing a really great job despite all of those things. So should we just start by making sure everyone is kind of acquainted with the cheeses that we're going to work through? We wanted to get all of you the cheeses, so some of mine are not actually what you have. The first cheese should be your Blue Ledge Cortina. Mine looks different because it is. And then we've got the Winnemere. Mine also looks different because I got a little piece of what we're calling the Megamere, which is the large format, but it's the one that has spruce bark on it. If you can find spruce bark on one of your cheeses, you found the Winnemere. And Cabot cloth bound, which may look very familiar to some of you. And we're going to end things. You can follow your nose to the Hooligan, also that nice orangish, kind of slightly tacky rind. And those are our cheeses. And then as an accompaniment, we have the Bureau's kettle corn, which is one of my favorite snacks and also one of my favorite things just to put on a cheese board. I did it once sort of as a joke in a class, and people loved it, which just reinforces that salty and sweet is always fun with everything, and also just the importance of having a little fun with your cheese pairings, and just sometimes doing something that isn't classic but that you enjoy. It might be really fun and work well. The Bureau's kettle corn with Cabot cloth bound cheddar is actually one of my favorite cheese pairings, period. It's so good. Okay, we're gonna kind of back all the way up for just a minute and get a brief history lesson on cheese making in New England. And it goes all the way back. The Pilgrims brought dairy cows with them to the Plymouth colony to make butter and cheese. They established the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1629. Meanwhile, more East Anglian Puritans arrive, often bringing wheels of cheese, aged wheels with them, and bringing their cheese-making experience as well. Predominantly, cheese in New England was made in these early years by women on farms before it became a larger operation. Originally, it's, as with cheese making almost everywhere, it was a question of how do we have enough food to live through the winter before growing into something larger and making it for regional export. And this turns into big business. Boston merchants shipped cheese primarily to the Caribbean, 1 million pounds by 1800. And then as they started adopting more English innovations in industry, technology, factory, dairying, we see the rise of cheddar that has also happened in England. And they figure out, again, through the help of some English people and some English writing, how to make cheddar incredibly efficiently, so efficiently that they are exporting it to England, the traditional home of cheddar, at a much lower price point than the English producers were able to use. And that is one of the first times in history that people in Europe start warning, avoid the American stuff. It is of inferior quality. Don't touch it. And here's how you'll know what it is. We're going to come back to this later, but the cloth wrapping, the cloth banding that has become so ingrained in farmhouse English cheddars, specifically the Somerset cheddars, which are kind of some considered by many to be the best in the world. That cloth wrapping was actually an American technique. The United States had the textile industry to produce that cloth or muslin that was used in addition to using wax sometimes for the cheese. And this was a technological advancement. It was using products that had not really been used to prevent the cheese from drying out, from getting too hot or too cold during some of these long journeys. And it was effective at doing that, but that doesn't save it from being, in this case, probably not very good cheese. So this becomes the warning to the English in particular. If it's wrapped in cloth, it's inferior American product. But we'll come back to the cloth banded cheddars later. And so the early Puritan influence is one big reason we have this cheesemaking industry in New England. Another big reason is just our wonderful neighbors to the north, the great state of Vermont. As the Revolutionary War starts to intensify, a lot of the Puritans start trying to, it was getting a little too hot for them. They said, where can we go and just live a nice, peaceful, quiet life on a farm? And they looked north and they found those beautiful hills and mountains in Vermont, looking for this more peaceful life. Boston and New York become more and more industrial. Vermont remains very agricultural, as it still is today. And we're talking in the 18th and 19th centuries. It becomes the largest supplier of milk to the northeastern urban centers, specifically Boston, but also to some extent New York, although New York has lots of its own farms. Into the first half of the 20th century, Vermont has more cows than people. And in the first quarter of the 20th century, they had the highest dependence on their dairy industry for income. Today, the dairy industry in Vermont is still close to 3/4 of its agricultural income, which is incredibly significant. In 1950, there were 10,000 dairy farms in Vermont, which is huge. And these are small farms. These are not giant, massive factories, because you kind of can't have those in Vermont. It doesn't really work. Today, there's less than 500. We have lost 400 just in the last 10 to 12 years. So they are going out fast. And that's one of the reasons I think it's really important to focus tonight on people like New England cheesemakers, most of which tonight are located in Vermont. And the people who are trying to give traditional ways of life there and the agricultural landscape a fighting chance. And we do have some. So that's a kind of a transition to our first cheese tonight, from our friends at Blue Ledge Farm. Excuse me. And like all of the cheesemakers we're working with today, these are all first generation cheesemakers. And that is one of the cool distinctions from most of the cheese that we import from Europe, where we are working with people who are 5th, 6th, 7th generation cheesemakers. They're making a product in their region that has almost always been made there, and they're trying to preserve those traditions and do it the way in which it has always been done. In New England, we're doing this really fun thing where you get to borrow some of those traditions and also do what makes sense for your operation, your farm, your climate, your animals. And maybe make something original, maybe make something that is a total homage to a European style, or go somewhere in between. So our friends, Greg and Hannah Sessions, are the founders and still run Blue Ledge Farm. They met in college. They started dreaming in Europe of opening a goat farm, as you do when you're in your early 20s and you're walking around Florence. But then they did it. In 2000, they started turning an old cow farm in Salisbury, Vermont into a goat dairy. So they're just east of Lake Champlain. They brought in Alpine and La Mancha goats from, which are traditional European breeds for dairying, starting with just 4. Now they have 125, which sounds like a lot, but in the scale of cheese making is not that many. All of those animals need to be cared for. They need to be milked. They need to be fed. It is a tremendous amount of work. And they've done some really interesting things that are very in line with how we think about the importance of land and trying to work with people who care about their land, their animals, and future generations. So in 2004, they were looking to build a new cheese room, something that could support a larger production. And so they sold development rights to their whole land to the Vermont Land Trust. So that ensures that land can never be developed for really much of anything. It's going to be preserved as it is. They use that land for their animals, but they're also preserving 50 acres of wetlands, which are kind of a vital environment that is declining very quickly. So that's just to say they're good people. They really do put their values right there. I'm sure they could have made money selling that land to someone else to develop, rather than ensuring it will just never be developed. So onto their cheeses. They make some of my favorite. This one that we nearly always have is the Lake's Edge, which if you've been to our stores, hopefully you've seen. It's really striking, larger format, like 1.5 pound wheel that has a line of ash in the middle and then ash and a white mold on the outside. And it's the kind of one of the most recommended cheeses when people come in looking for some other goat cheeses that are larger productions than what we sell. And we can usually say, this will be similar and perhaps even better. The cheese we have tonight, though, is their Cortina, which was one of the things that's really interesting to me about the same recipe as the Lake's Edge, just in a smaller format and without the ash. So if you ever want to do a very cool experiment, get yourself some of both of those cheeses, and you can sort of see the impact of that ash, which does have a really interesting chemical and biological impact on the ripening of the cheese, as well as just the different dimensions, which have a lot to do with moisture loss and in turn how the cheese will ripen. Both made with the same excellent milk from their goats. Again, this is a farmstead dairy, so they milk the goats, they make the cheese, they age the cheese. It's not the only way of doing things, but it's certainly one of our favorites when people are able to do that. This cheese is modeled on a classic French cheese that's called crottin. They took the word crottin, they turned it into Cortina. The traditional cheese is made in the Sancerre region, so we're kind of in Loire Valley, which is where we think of some of the really great goat cheese traditions in all the world come from. And we, in our stores, almost always have a pretty wide selection of Loire Valley goat cheeses. This particular cheese typically is bright, it's clean, it's got a really nice lactic note to it when it's younger. You definitely can age it more, and it'll start to get more savory, pick up some more mushroomy notes. You'll still get kind of a grassy finish, and depending on the specific cheese and the batch and how it's stored, it might start to get very creamy and gooey. It might get a little bit more firm and fudgy. One of the fun things about cheese is it's hard to be sure exactly what's going to happen. And it's a delightful cheese. It's terrific if you were to have it with a glass of Sancerre, in a nod to the inspiration for it. But a really nice way to start off a cheese plate or to start off a meal. And I think that's what we had to say about this cheese. I don't know. We're taking questions, Morgan? Do we have questions?
Yeah, if people want to chime in their thoughts on the cheese, if they like it or not, and then obviously any questions along the way. Okay.
We're enjoying.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say we're having it with sliced strawberries and very thinly toasted slices of the bread that came along, and it's really good. It's nice.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's goat cheese and fresh fruit is really, you can't mess that up. It's so good. I love to go seasonal with some of those fresher cheeses. So if I were doing this on a plate right now, I would almost certainly get some really nice citrus. Blood oranges would be really nice and look beautiful. Just that contrast. But strawberries sound great. Little taste of summer. And honey would also always be really nice with this cheese. Or popcorn. Popcorn would be good. Okay, let's move on to the Winnemere. Important preface, excuse me. One of the things we're always telling people is the rind is edible. Eat the rind, try the rind. The rind of this cheese is bark. Please don't eat it. It probably won't hurt you terribly, but it probably will not taste good or feel good. So I'm going to suggest you not eat the outer rind of this cheese, which is bark. It's one of the only rinds that we suggest not eating of cheeses that we sell. Basically, if it's bark or if it's wax or if it's Parmigiano Reggiano, and you're going to end up at the dentist's office. Technically, it's edible, but your teeth will not agree. So don't eat the rind, please. But everything else on that is edible. So Winnemere and Jasper Hill Farm. We're going to talk about Jasper Hill twice tonight. Once in their capacity as affineurs, as people who age cheese for other operations, which is an important part of their origin story. And also, there's the sellers of Jasper Hill, there's Jasper Hill Farm. They're the same company, but it's helpful sometimes to make the distinction. So Jasper Hill Farm makes and ages their own cheese, primarily with milk from their own herd of Ayrshire cows, but for some of their pasteurized cheeses, they bring in milk from neighbors, all also within Greensboro, Vermont, where they're located. We have done an entire Voyage Fromage all about Jasper Hill Farm, but they are one of our most important, not just domestic relationships, just relationships of any cheesemaker anywhere. They are one of the people that we visit the most often, partially because of proximity, but not only that. And they're one of the companies that I just look to as being world-class in every way. If you're not totally new to New England artisanal cheese, you have no doubt had some of their cheeses before. They've been, sorry, I'm losing my notes. They've been making cheese in Greensboro since the early 2000s. Jasper Hill was founded by two brothers, Andy and Matteo Keeler, who are still heavily involved in running the operation. And one of the key things they did early on is they blew out a hill in Greensboro, Vermont, where their farm is, and put in 7 aging chambers so that they could very effectively age very different types of cheese for themselves and for other people. 7 vaults. The Winnemere, I'm pretty sure, is aged in Vault 7. Each one has a slightly different setup, both with the microflora that's there and different temperature, humidity, and control of air exchange. And that's kind of what you're looking for in a cheese cave or an aging facility. And they've figured out kind of 6-ish different profiles that you would want to age a variety of different cheeses very successfully. So Winnemere is another cheese that is an homage in many ways to a European style. Every year, our company looks forward to November when we get our first shipment of Vacherin Montor, which is like the Winnemere, a round of cow's milk cheese that's wrapped in spruce bark, and only made in the late fall, early winter months. So why are we doing that? And it's the same reason Jasper Hill is, and the same reason that folks in the French and Swiss Jura Mountains are, which is that the cow's diet changes as the weather gets cooler. They start eating, instead of running around eating wildflowers and grasses, their diet turns to more hay, more grain, because there is not fresh grass to eat at that point in the year. And the result for the milk is that it's much lower in protein, it's much higher in fat. So where traditionally these cheeses, these cows in the Jura region are being used to make cheeses like Comté and these long-aged, large wheels of cheese, suddenly the milk is not very good for that. And cheesemakers are incredibly resourceful people. So they said, well, what can we do with this? What if we made something that's much higher moisture to take advantage of all of that fat? We'll age it for a much shorter time. But we're going to have a problem, which is the way we want to make this is just going to ooze out. It's never going to turn into a wheel of cheese as we think of wheels of cheese. And I don't know how they figured this out, but they said, what if we just wrap this in some spruce bark and we'll use that to help it keep its shape early on. And then we can maybe take that off later if we need to, but that'll help the cheese set up instead of putting it into traditional molds, which early on would have been made out of wood. Now we're often made out of plastic. Or, there's a lot of other materials have been used. But and it turned out it worked really well. They made this cheese with this beautiful milk. They washed it with a salt brine solution in cultures and kept it wrapped in the spruce bark. And in just, maybe 6 to 8 weeks, they had this beautiful wheel of cheese that gets very soft, very gooey. And I always think it's just a cozy cheese. It's almost like a warm blanket on those really cold winter nights, like this one. And it's a really one of the world's great cheeses, and it's what true seasonal eating is about. And cheese is seasonal, some more than others, but this is something that, because of name protections in Europe, by law can only be made during the late fall, early winter, and then you just can't make it anymore. There's not legal protections to that in the US because we don't operate under the same system, but Jasper Hill does the same thing. They start making the Winnemere in late October, usually, depends a little bit on the season, and then we're still getting it, obviously, but I'm sure the season is starting to wrap up fairly soon. For this particular cheese, they only use milk from the Ayrshire cows that they have at their Andersonville farm. They do have cows in a couple different places. They wrap it in spruce bark, mostly from trees from their own land or from Vermont. And the bark is the cambium layer. So it's not the very outside of the tree, if you're wondering about that. It's an inner layer. And again, this resourceful thing. We've got spruce trees there. This is another way to use local resources to add value to what is essentially really good grass and then cows eating it. And that is another important part of why Vermont cheesemaking and dairying is so successful, is they have the right climate and the right environment for a lot of it, including really good quality grass for the animals out on pasture to eat, which absolutely does show up in the milk, especially in a raw milk cheese, which the Winnemere is. But I did mention that, and sorry, we're getting all over the place. I was up at 4 a.m. today because we had a cheese delivery of international cheeses. So we're doing our best. Much like the Mont d'Or, the Jura cheeses, the Winnemere is wrapped in spruce bark. The Jasper Hill employs, I believe, the only full-time, it's called sanglier, someone who wraps cheese in spruce bark. That is a word that is used in France and Switzerland. Last I checked, at least, Jasper Hill was the only one that had a full-time person in their employment in the US who does that. So you can, I'm pretty sure, find cool videos online of this guy going out to the trees, taking some really cool looking tools to just get the right part of the bark, which then get treated, like soaked so that they're a little more pliable, and then wrapped around the cheese. Side note, Jasper Hill, because they're always thinking about what else can we do with this thing. This past year, they took some of the liquid from soaking that spruce bark and they used it to wash another one of their Alpine style cheeses, the Alpha Tolman. And they did a special release of that our cheesemongers picked out for us to sell back in October. We still have some at our store. The Huron store maybe still has some, I'm not sure, but just another interesting thing to do with something that's usually considered just a byproduct and is then, I don't know, just thrown down the drain. So we're washing that cheese in a cultured salt brine during the aging so that rind starts to develop. After usually just about 60 days, they are ready to rock and roll and party and get sent out to us kind of immediately at 60 days. They're certainly good for quite a bit longer, but they're usually delicious at that point, which is the minimum we can age and sell a raw milk cheese in the US. The really cool innovation here, I think, can we go back to that picture, Morgan? Yeah, there we go. In 2015, they built something called the Calderwood Cropping Center. And that was to figure out how do we take advantage of this incredible grass we have and preserve it in a better way. It takes about 2 weeks of sun to properly dry grass so that it can be used as really good, nutritious hay. If it's not dried properly, that's where we start to see really big issues pop up, like listeria. That is one of the biggest contributors to finding listeria, is improperly dried hay. So we don't want to mess around with that really ever. But finding 2 weeks to slowly dry grass into hay in Vermont is a thing that happens literally never. They do not ever have 2 straight weeks of sunshine in the summer to dry that hay, or dry the grass into hay. So they opened a cropping center, and first of its kind in the US, borrowed from some things, again, that European farmers were doing. And they have what is basically a jet engine in a field in Vermont with a roof over it that has solar panels on it to generate a whole lot of solar energy. And so the the grass is dried, and then it's baled into what you can see in that picture on the left. That's, about half of my height. That was a picture taken in a maybe 2017 visit that we did to pick out wheels of cheese. But it gives you some sense of how big these bales are. And all of this is from their fields and their farms. I think they said that one of those bales is equal to like one wheel of cheese. That's basically the energy that it produces for the cows. And using the cropping center, it takes 6 weeks 6 hours, 6 hours rather than 2 weeks to remove that water. And you have this really beautiful closed system where everything the cow needs pretty much is coming from right there where it's living. Even when there's not good grass to eat outside. So the grass and the drying of it are really central to this cheese, and being able to make it safely, being able to make it delicious. And yeah, I hope everyone likes it. It's one of my favorites.
Go ahead.
Question. Greensboro is how far up in Vermont? Is it up near Lake Champlain? Is it down in the southern part, in the middle, near Rutland? Where is it?
It's way up there. Northeast Kingdom. It's like 45 minutes from the border, from the Quebec border.
North of Burlington?
Yeah,
Wow. That's way up there.
it's way up there. Yeah.
Can you speak at all about, I think is there Harbison also wrapped, correct, in bark? Is there,
Yes.
But that seems to be available year round. So is that the main difference?
Great question. There's a few differences, but also some very important similarities. So the rind development and the things they do to produce that rind are different. They're employing some very different cultures and microbes, but there are some similar techniques, namely a higher moisture cheese wrapped in spruce bark so that it stays together. And early on with both these cheeses, they wrap them in the spruce and then they put a rubber band around it because it really would just not stay together on its own. It doesn't want to. It's too low in protein and high in fat and moisture to kind of set up. Yeah, you can see the rubber bands there. That's perfect. And the Harbison would look very similar at that point in its life. This wheel is a little larger, and I would say one of the key differences is that this is made with raw milk, where Harbison is pasteurized. It is coming from different cows also. I would have to double check. It might be a different breed of cow, which would also have some effect on the composition of the milk in particular. And yes, Harbison is available year round. The Winnemere is really just paying tribute to this really seasonal thing and saying, here's kind of the best thing we can do with this particular milk right now is to make this cheese that at other points in the year, those cows' milk is being used for other cheeses. But yeah, there's definitely similarities there. And when people come in and say, I like Harbison, but I wanted something that's maybe a little bit stronger, a little funkier, I'm always very happy. So I'm like, I've got the cheese for you.
How long did they age it?
2 months.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, 2 months. And typically not more than that before it gets shipped out. Again, in the US with raw milk cheese, it must be aged 60 days before being sold, even just to us. Like they can't ship it to us under 60 days.
Oh, that's crazy. Jeremy, when we were in England, looking at the hay and everything, they have silage, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And is that because they can't dry it the way we can here in the United States?
I suspect it is. I'm pretty sure it is. And the English have a different understanding and tradition of silage than like anyone else. And silage it's basically fermented hay. or
Like
you can even think
kimchi.
of it as like pickled. Sorry?
Yeah. Like kimchi of grass, right?
A little, yeah. And when it's done properly, it works very well and it's very nutritious for the cows. And when it's done improperly, it is terrible for them and results in some bad cheese. And it's sort of like a dirty word, like, oh, the cows were eating silage in some circles, but not in England.
No.
And I have not done this, but I have been told numerous times that if you visit a lot of the farmstead cheesemakers in England, they will have you eating silage because they're so proud of it. And, you know, maybe not eating a lot, but at least like, oh, here, why don't you taste it?
Yeah.
They did the same thing with the hay when I was at Jasper Hill. They did say, all right, this was the first cutting, this was the second cutting, so you can taste the difference in the sugar content. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure I can, but you know, it's interesting to try a little bit of hay. So yeah, I'm sure that they need to, in England, they need to in some ways just embrace how wet it is and figure out how to work with that. And they have. They make great cheese using silage there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And so,
that's what we saw. Thank you.
of course, yeah, it's a great question. All right, well, England is probably a great transition to our next cheese. So we are staying in Greensboro, Vermont to some extent. And we're going to backtrack again in New England history to talk about one of the most important names in New England dairy and cheese history that hopefully you all know, which is Cabot. The Cabot and Cabot cloth bound is the same as in all of the other Cabot products that you see out there. A lot of which is cheese, but is cheddar cheese, in fact, but they make a range of other things as well. They are founded in 1893 to make butter, or rather a farm is founded in Cabot, Vermont to make butter. In 1919, they formed the Cabot Cooperative. So they are over 100 years now, and it's formed by 94 local dairy farmers who say, what if we pooled our milk and then we could make more stuff and make it maybe more consistent and invest together in a little bit of infrastructure. And rather than 94 farms that are just at risk at any time of being destroyed, we can work together. And this is a model that we also see in a number of places in Europe where cheese is made exclusively using milk that is pooled by a cooperative of farmers. They start making cheddar in 1930. So they've got quite a bit of experience doing that. Cabot cheddar is absolutely the cheese that I grew up with and will always have a soft spot in my heart. There are today about 1,000 farms in New England and New York that are part of the cooperative. And it works really well because it allows them to use some of their milk for the liquid market, which means you can kind of immediately get some money back. The bad news about the liquid milk market is it's almost impossible to make money selling your milk that way. It's a commodities market. So the price is set in Chicago by someone, and it has nothing to do with the quality of the milk that's being used, only the volume of it, which is part of why we have so many people turning to cheese making in places like Vermont that are still dominated by small farms using the really wonderful natural resources they have to make excellent milk and figure out, a value-added product. If you take that same great quality milk, you can actually bring out even more of its character if you add some salt and grow some mold on it and stick it in a cave for a while. And if you do that, Vermont dairy farms, New England dairy farms might just have this fighting chance. So kind of seeing that, the Cabot Cooperative, we're going to fast forward a little bit now to the year 2003, or actually just a few years earlier than that. and I learned this story just a few years ago at an event celebrating 20 years of Cabot Clothbound. It was an industry event, and someone from Cabot told this story that I don't think anyone else in that room knew, which is that he went out in the early 2000s and he started visiting cheese shops throughout New England, primarily, trying to figure out what should we do next, because Cabot was making, they had done, 2-year reserve, 3-year reserve, 4-year wax. They'd done kind of everything they could think of doing with their cheddars, different aging, different adjuncts that they were mixing in. And it was like, what's the next frontier for us? And this gentleman went to Formaggio Kitchen on Huron Ave in Cambridge and started talking to a cheesemonger there and kind of said, do you have any ideas? And she said, well, have you thought about doing a traditional like English cloth-bound cheddar? And he said, that's an interesting idea. And he brought it back. And in some ways, the rest is history. He said he came back to the store a year or two later and she was gone. So I don't know if this person ever will know that she made this suggestion that really changed the course of a few different companies. I will also say that there's no way they weren't going to arrive at that conclusion eventually. It maybe took a little pushing from some people they trusted, but the idea of making a cloth-bound cheddar would almost certainly have come up eventually. But I do think it's incredibly cool that it did come from Formaggio Kitchen. We're very proud to be involved in this cheese really at every stage of its life. So he takes us back to Cabot and they say, cool, we don't have a way to age this cheese. They have a totally sterile environment for aging their cheeses, which are block cheddars that are typically aged in wax or in just vacuum sealed blocks, which is a very different aging process that's mostly anaerobic versus making a wheel of cheese and giving it some interaction with the air and the elements and a whole lot of microbes to create something that's a lot more difficult to do. So they start looking around to say, we need another partner here. We need to work with someone. And they talk to these upstart brothers up in Greensboro, Vermont, Matteo and Andy Keeler, and say, would you be interested? There's, wow, I don't know when this picture was taken, but they were young then. That's Andy on the left and Matteo on the right in the cellars. And that is either Vault 5 or Vault 6. Those are the cheddar vaults. They have 2 vaults that are just these wooden shelves of cheddar cheese, a couple different ones, probably 3 or so different cheddars over the years, or cheddar adjacent things. But now they have 2, the Cabot Clothbound and the one called Vault 5, named after the vault that it's aged in. Also a collaboration with Cabot. And they said, how can we work together? We'd like to make this cheese in some way with you. And they agreed on a number of things. They were going to use a single herd of cows, of Holstein cows in Peacham, Vermont, to make this cheese. It was going to start off its life at Cabot. And then when the wheels were fairly young, they would be shipped to Jasper Hill. At Jasper Hill, they're coated with lard and then another cloth wrapping, then aged in the caves there, in the cellars, for 10 to 15 months. So that cloth wrapping, cloth banding, now you're allowing a rind to develop that if you've seen block cheddars, you can picture them. They don't have any rind to them. And you can really see that, if you still have any of your cheese left, there's a lot going on here. There's a really interesting gradient of colors showing you that there's something different on the exterior of this cheese than the interior, which is exciting. It means that there's a lot happening and not just one consistent thing throughout, and that it's ripening in some interesting ways. And that allows far more complex flavors to develop. I'm never going to say that one cheese is better than the other. Raw milk is not necessarily better than pasteurized. cloth band cave aged is not necessarily better than vacuum sealed block cheddar, but it is, even just on a like chemical level, it is more complex. And whether you like that complexity more or not is totally up to you. And there's really no wrong answer there. But it's worth appreciating that there's more flavor here. There's a more interesting texture than the some of the other cheddars that are made in kind of a slightly more industrial way. Many of which I love, just to be really clear. Not always as much as this Cabot cloth bound, but and then they start making this cheese, and it's like going okay. They really aren't sure that this is going to work well. And so Matteo Keeler calls up our former owner, Isan Gerdal at Formaggio Kitchen, and says, we're working on this new cheese. I need some help selling it. What do you think? And Isan went up to the cellars. He loaded up something like 20 wheels of cheese into the trunk and said, I'll be back in 2 months. And these are 40-pound wheels of cheese. And true to his word, he came back and said, let's do this again. And that started a really, really beautiful tradition where this is nearly always, if not our top selling, one of our 2 or 3 top selling cheeses at our stores. And it is a cheese that you can buy elsewhere. But I think what's very special is that we send cheesemongers up a couple times a year to select batches of cheese. So we'll go into the cellars with usually one of the cheesemakers, one of the affineurs, maybe someone from the sales or sensory team, and we'll taste 3, 4, 5 different batches of cheese and say, this is the one that we want right now for our customers. With the Cabot cloth bound, we do go for a fairly consistent flavor profile. We've sometimes called it chicken and biscuits because it's a little bit toasty and it's got a really nice, like brothy, sort of chicken brothy flavor to it. It's not exactly the same every time, but they have identified about 3 or 4 different flavor profiles that we see in Cabot cloth bound. And we kind of almost always go for that particular profile. So, and then we also buy this cheese directly from Jasper Hill. It doesn't go through another distributor. It's not sitting in someone's warehouse. It goes from the caves. They say, this is ready to go. This batch is ready to ship now. It's going to be good. They send it directly to us, to our stores, and we sell it so quickly that it's not really sitting anywhere for any extended period of time. So I do think kind of the value add of getting this cheese from us is that we are selecting it. We are taking care of that cheese. It's coming directly to us. And we think that it's delicious kind of day in, day out. One of my I could eat this cheese every day. So that's the Cabot cloth bound. We could probably do a whole thing on cheddar. Maybe we have before. I don't know if there are questions about that or about the cellars, or if we're, yes.
My frame of reference on the cheddar is Montgomery cheddar from, I did a tour. We did that cheese tour in Somerset last fall. Is so different from this. I really like this. It's a very distinct taste. It's I almost taste butter in it almost. It's very different than Montgomery. Really, really different.
Yeah. Very different. I totally agree. Very different from Montgomery's, which is kind of still considered the standard bearer for those traditional English farmhouse cheeses or cheddars. A lot of similarities in technique, but we are working with different animals in a very different place, different environment. And I know the Keelers and Jamie Montgomery are friends. They visit each other. They taste each other's cheeses all the time. There's a lot of love there, and I'm sure that they've learned things from each other. And yeah, the cheeses do taste very different. The Montgomerys can be very mustardy and horseradishy, very savory.
Right.
This tends to have just a little hint of sweetness to it. which the Montgomery's basically never does. So yeah, there are some similarities, but flavor-wise, they're very different from each other. And it's really cool to see that range of what you can get from a cloth-bound cheddar.
Right. Thank you.
I'm jealous. I've never visited Somerset, but I hope to.
You have to. It was great, wasn't it? A couple of us have gone on that trip.
Oh, that's so cool. Wow.
Yes.
I'm curious what people think about the cloth-bound cheddar with the popcorn.
Want to try it? Hold on.
I heard somebody already ate all of theirs. Joyce and Rob.
Twice.
Richard.
For some reason, that's the same thing that happens at my house.
Well, I'm glad I'm not alone.
We've been enjoying it. It's a nice combination.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember we've sold that maple kettle corn since longer than I've worked at Formaggio Kitchen. And I just
Wow.
remember early on seeing that and just saying, oh my goodness, like what a great idea. Like if I ever had an idea that good, I would just retire, just call it. Like, I'm not going to come up with something better than that. I think kettle corn is I think it's fine, but adding the maple, adding that like little bit of like bitterness and complexity, it's just a totally different thing. It's so good. And just the right amount of salt. It also feels very New England to me because it has maple, it has corn, and it's actually, we get it. They pop it to order. We call up or we email bureaus who run this cool little sugar house in Lyme, Connecticut, and say, we'd like a case of, 2-3 cases of popcorn. They pop it and they send it to us. That's great. We love them. Okay, and we're going to go to our last cheese maker. So for this, we're moving south from Vermont to Connecticut, to Cato Corner Farm in Colchester, where they again make farmstead cheese. So they have a herd of about 45 Jersey cows on pasture. They make the cheese, they age the cheese. There they are. That's Elizabeth McAllister and Mark Gilman, a mother and son powerhouse duo, which I think is super cool. I don't know a lot of other cheese operations that started that way, but they started making cheese together in 97. And they decided very early on, again, they were devoted to protecting their environment. They work with 2 groups to do for land protection partnerships, so that similar to Blue Ledge, that land is just not going to be developed. It's going to remain as beautiful, pristine farmland. The Jersey cows are known for being one of the better producers of excellent milk for cheese making specifically. Tends to be higher in fat content, although they often produce a little bit less milk than some other breeds, but the quality of that milk is much higher. And the Hooligan is one of their better known cheeses that is pretty often in our cheese case. There's their operation. You can see how small that make room is. It's really not very big. And they're cutting the curds and then stacking the curds, hand ladling them into molds. It's worth noting just that these things are being done by hand. That is the root of a lot of great cheese making, is getting your hands right down into that vat, right into the curds. We're not using machines. It's real people with their hands are making all of these things. And the Hooligan is until maybe like 7 years ago, maybe a little less, all of their cheeses were raw milk, but they added on some equipment to allow them to make a few more options, more cheeses, including just a pasteurizer. They just didn't have one, so all of their cheeses had to be raw milk. They have one now, so they are making a few pasteurized cheeses, but the Hooligan they've made for quite a long time. And this is their washed rind cheese. So with some similarities to the Winnemere, this is aged 60 to 75 days, and they bathe it in a salt brine once a week. And that's a great shot of their cellar where they age their cheeses. That is clearly not Hooligan that he's holding, but so that salt brine helps attract some really beneficial bacteria to the rind of that cheese, particularly a class called Brevibacterium linens, B linens, which if you smelled the cheese, it's strong. Its bark is much worse than its bite. What you're smelling there is also the bee linens. That's what's producing a lot of those aromas. But the good news is they also are producing some really delicious flavor compounds in the cheese itself. So this is really just a kind of textbook example of a great washed rind cheese where that bacteria on the surface of the rind helps create the rind and then develop and ripen the rest of the cheese as it ages. This one never tends to get super soft and gooey. It'll get softer sometimes, but it's never going to be just kind of like a puddle of cheese, which I actually appreciate about it. It's got some really nice, like funky, meaty flavors to it, really beautiful texture without being overwhelmingly strong. It's not like your entry level wash rind cheese, but it's also not, only the most hardcore French person can eat this kind of cheese. And this cheese has become sort of informally a seasonal cheese in that they were finding that when they were aging the cheese during the summer, their cellar was getting a little too warm and the cheese was not aging the way that they wanted it to. So for different environmental reasons, they've started making this a cheese that they just don't really make in the summer. They make it the rest of the year. And that's a change in the last couple of years, possibly because summers are warmer now than they used to be. And just a couple of degrees there made a difference. But it's something we've been talking to them about off and on for quite a while, of the just seasonal supply of this cheese, the Hooligan. So kind of a great way to end a meal, something with a little funky, maybe with a fortified wine or a malty beer. And yeah, those are our cheeses. That is New England cheese making. So we got I think, overview of some of the most important people in New England cheese making. The oldest operation here is in the late 90s. And that kind of reflects where New England cheese making is that, and domestic cheese making, where there was this kind of renaissance that started in like the 70s, where some people started some small farms and said, we're going to start using traditional methods for cheese making, and we're not going to cut corners, and we're going to do this on a very small scale. And that's sort of filtered throughout the country, where I think now we have more knowledge, more experience, slightly more support, definitely more consumer understanding of what these cheeses are, why they're so hard to make, how to appreciate them. And we have this some great resources in the form of really good grass to support making these cheeses. And sort of, I hope, growing just infrastructure for doing it and supporting it. These are some just wonderful people who've decided to devote their lives to doing this. So I'm really glad that we were able to support them tonight. I hope that you'll continue to support them in at Formaggio Kitchen or other cheesemongers that you might know. Those are kind of my closing thoughts as the very proud New Englander. They make me proud to be a New Englander.
Jerry, can I ask a question? This one was a stinky one.
Yes.
I mean, my kitchen, I was like, what in the world just happened? And I like a stinky cheese. Are bee linens, like if I smell that, would that be a typical smell from bee linens, or will they always be different?
There are some pretty typical smells. And in that typical kind of slightly orange color as well is a pretty good giveaway that we've got bee linens at work. They're not exactly the same bacteria, but they are closely related to bacteria that we see show up in other sort of warm, moist, salty environments, namely things like locker rooms and gym clothes. And it makes sense because we're adding a salt brine and aging these at slightly warmer temperatures than something like the Cabot cloth bound. They're humid, they're salty. It's not the exact same bacteria, but they are closely related. And so, you can probably imagine that smell.
Yeah, I did.
These taste way better than gym socks, I promise.
Yeah,
But
the taste is delicious. The smell, I have to admit, and I like a good wash rind. That one was a little, it's like, holy moly's, maybe I just need to air it out for a bit.
it could help a little bit, but if you leave it out too long, it's maybe going to get even worse.
Yeah.
But it's going to taste amazing. The texture will be great.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's worth it. Does a Poisse have the same?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Ogleshield?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All great examples of washed rind cheeses. And
Okay.
the apocryphal story is that it's illegal to eat at Poisse on the Paris Metro because of the smell. I don't think it's real, but it's a funny story.
No, you wouldn't want it on a train, that's for sure.
No, I wouldn't.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Blues, any blue cheeses in New England that you recommend?
Yeah, of course. Blue Ledge Farm makes a great blue called Middlebury Blue. Definitely worth seeking out. The Bailey Hazen Blue from Jasper Hill is consistently excellent and one of those blue cheeses that I have recommended to so many people who tell me they don't like blue cheese. And then they try that and I say, it's sort of like, I gotcha. Turns out you do like blue cheese. Maybe not strong blues, but that's okay. There's a couple blues made by Parish Hill, who are in like the Putney area of Vermont. They make one called West Blue. That's excellent. And sometimes one called Jack's Blue. Those are definitely some favorites. I'm sure that I'm missing someone, and I'm going to feel terrible about it in like 10 minutes. But those are for sure some highlights of New England blue cheeses.
Thank you.
Yeah. Of course.
This was really informative. Thank you. I appreciated all the history of the New England cheese process, really.
You're very welcome. Very happy to talk about it. And I don't know if anyone's in the Cambridge area, but if find yourself near Kendall Square and want to stop by Formaggio Kendall, I'm usually there and be very happy to talk more about this and taste some more New England cheeses. You're always welcome to email me. It's just jeremy@formaggiocambridge.com. Happy to continue the conversation if anyone wants to.
Thank you very much. It was very informative and I really enjoyed. And what Beth was saying about the smell, I was thinking the same while I was at the presentation, I was wondering what is happening in this room. And then I just, at first I was wondering if I should eat the outer part. I wasn't sure. Okay, it's not the
Yeah,
now
it's like taste it. If you don't like
Yeah,
it, it's fine.
but
And
it's
if you
delicious.
do,
It's a delicious. It tastes delicious. The cheese is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I
I
promise
like
it's
the outer
supposed to smell like that.
Yes. Out of the three, actually, I prefer that. It was so delicious. But yeah. Okay. See you all next time. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.